Want to make amazing coffee but don't want to invest a lot yet? Well, today I'm going to show you how hundreds of my customers have gone from using old, stale coffee in old coffee pots to using killer, fresh roasted whole bean coffee in the Clever Brewer. So let's get started. Hey guys, Ted Jones here, owner of Riverview Coffee Roasters. I do roast order coffee subscriptions in the top 1% of the world's supply. I roast them at your pace and ship them to you ultra fresh. I also teach you everything you need to know to get world-class coffee in the comfort of your own home. So if this is your first time on the channel and you'd like to see more, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Also hit the bell notifications button so you can always be notified when I put up a new post. So today we're focusing on the Clever Brewer. It's a simple brewer that combines drip brewing with French press brewing, eliminating the drawbacks of each. It's very inexpensive, only runs about $25, so it's a great way to get started to create world-class coffee in your home without having to invest a lot. It's got a lid that keeps in heat. It also has a valve, so you could steep the coffee in here and then put it over your mug and it'll go right through the filter and give you that clean, full-bodied cup. So today we're gonna focus on 3 different brews. We're gonna do a light roasted Ethiopian coffee, we're gonna do a medium roasted Guatemalan coffee, and we're gonna do a dark roasted Peruvian coffee. We're gonna change everything on each one. We're gonna do different water to coffee ratios, different steeping times, different grind particle size, and we're gonna change all of that so you can see how the profile can be completely different due to your liking. And you could have, let's say, 3 of these in your house, and for 3 different people, you could create 3 different cups. So the first thing we wanna do is get our brewer on top of the scale, and we wanna put a filter in it, of course. I like to use these Chemex filters because they're ultra thick and create an extra clean cup. But you could get some less expensive filters at the grocery store. You can find them on the website also under the different brewing tutorials. There's also Chemex filters on the Chemex page. So you do have some options that way. You just wanna make sure you get a cone style filter. If you're ever in a serious pinch, you can always use a paper towel. I'll show you how you can fold one up real quick here. You just fold it like this. This is the last resort. This is when you have nothing else in the house, you really want that cup of coffee, and you don't know what else to do. You get a select size paper towel, and you fold it corner to corner, boom. Stick it in like that, easy peasy. Like I said, don't do that unless you have no other option. So the next thing you wanna do is rinse off the filter with a little bit of your hot water. That'll preheat the cone. It'll also get any paper out of the cone or the filter itself. So let's go ahead and do that first. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and put our ground coffee in. We're using 20 grams of a light roasted Guji Ethiopian available on the website right now. I always have different Africans available. Ethiopian's my favorite, but I also have some great Kenyans and Congos and different style coffees that'll be available at different times of the year depending on the season and what's best at that moment. You want to tear your scale out. If you don't have a scale, you don't have all these tools, you don't have to have them to start. When I started out, I just had a basic pot to heat water in. I filled up my cone, guesstimated on the coffee. You could do an estimate of 5 grams for every tablespoon of coffee you use, and you're gonna get pretty darn close that way. All right, so now we're gonna wanna fill with our hot water. We're gonna do 340 grams to this 20 grams, which is gonna be a 17-to-1 ratio. That's how you control the flavor profiles, is not only by the grind size and by the steeping time and those other factors, but also by the ratio of water to grounds you're using. And we want a delicate, complex, nuanced cup where we can actually taste the different notes in the coffee in a very clean manner. So using a little bit extra water is actually gonna clarify that for us. So let's go ahead and add that water now. Ooh, this coffee is really creaming up nicely. All right, and now we're gonna let that steep for 4 minutes. And we're gonna give it a good stir here. Make sure everything's incorporated well. I like to use bamboo stirrers because they don't get hot or cold. You know, you don't lose any heat by using a cold metal spoon, for example. But you can use whatever you have on hand. Sometimes I've even just warmed the spoon up with my hand itself. All right, so when we get to 1.5 minutes, we're gonna give it another stir. Make sure we get everything in there and all the flavor coming out. Okay, so we're coming up on the 1.5 minute mark. So now we'll wanna go ahead and give that another stir. You'll see it'll cream up real nice for us. Go ahead and replace the lid again. Make sure we keep all the heat in there. Okay, now we're coming up on 4 minutes. We can go ahead and give that a final stir. And we can release that into the cup now. It actually comes through very quickly because the valve opens it up quite a bit. So that makes it nice because it doesn't sit in there much longer, but you could always adjust your time based on your grind. If you do a finer grind, of course, it's going to take a little bit longer to come through. But you'll see with this way, you're going to get a rich, full-bodied cup every single time, and it's always going to be a really clean profile because of the fact that it goes through the filter. So now we've let the coffee completely drain. We've got our perfect cup of coffee. It won't drip anymore because of the fact that the valve closes as soon as you lift it. That's our light roasted Ethiopian coffee. And we'll go ahead and do a taste test at the end so we can see how these cups differ. That one we did with 205-degree water. The next one we're going to do with 200-degree water. And the last one we're going to do with 195-degree water. The reason being is the longer the coffee's roasted, the less heat it needs to pull the flavor out of it because the cell structure of the beans becomes more and more brittle the longer it cooks. When you get a really dense light roasted coffee like this, you're actually going to want to use very hot water. And it does help to measure the coffee by the scale because light roasted coffee will be so much more dense and heavy that it won't take as many beans to fill the bag. So you could have a 12-ounce bag of dark roasted coffee and a 12-ounce bag of light roasted coffee, and the dark roasted coffee will look like it's twice as much. But in reality, it's the same weight. That's why weighing will always give you an accurate brew. Because if you were to use the same quantity of beans as the dark roasted beans, you would actually be using a lot more coffee with the light roasted one. And what happens is if you use too much coffee and you don't use enough water, then not enough flavor comes out, which creates under extraction, which gives you a sour cup. If you use not enough coffee, you can get a bitter cup because too much flavor has been pulled out to the point where undesirable compounds in the coffee is getting pulled out. So when you get it right and balanced, you're going to get a sweet, smooth, clean cup. And then anytime you don't get results you like, you can make little adjustments and get it the way you want it. So that's what makes it really neat, fun, cool, is that you can play with it and get it just the way you like it. So let's go ahead and get that next cup started. Okay, so we're all reset now. I'm ready to start with our next brew. This is a medium roasted Guatemalan coffee. I think of Guatemala as the Cabernet of coffees. It's full bodied and really crowd pleasing. I love it. I have customers that have to have it every week. If I had to choose 3 coffees, I would choose Ethiopia, Guatemala, and Brazil as far as origins go. And origins are, places where coffee comes from. So many coffees you get today are blends and you don't really know what's in them. You might see this name like a Big Tada blend or whatever, and you think, oh, well, the name sounds great, but I have no idea what I'm getting there. And that's what I try to do, is give some traceability to you to understand where these coffees come from. I always know which farmer grew it, what varietals they're using, what their farm's like, and their processing methods are like as far as how they grow and how they deal with the coffee all the way through the drying process until I get it. That's part of the fun, and it also lets you know you're getting a good product, something that's natural grown, which is something else I focus on. I don't focus on any pesticide or chemically grown coffees. Obviously, I only do the top 1% in the world, so those are eliminated. And certified organics I sometimes use. For example, this Peruvian coffee is certified organic, but most of the time I'm dealing with mom and pop farms that can't afford all these certifications, and they're growing in a natural ecosystem, which means they're depending on the volcanic soil, the altitude, the surrounding vegetation, everything that creates the perfect storm for the best tasting coffee in the world. All right, so let's go ahead and add our water. Now on this one, we're gonna do a 15-to-1 brewing ratio. So we're gonna get a little bit different results. This time, instead of 4 minutes, we're gonna go for 3.5 minutes. Let's give this a good stir. Ooh, I can tell the difference in this coffee. It's a little bit deeper color. It's kind of got that milk chocolatey look to it. All right, so we're gonna let this steep for 3.5 minutes. At 1.5 minutes, we'll do the stir just like we did on the last one. Okay, so we're coming up on the 1.5 minute mark. Let's go ahead and give it a stir. Ooh, it's getting even more creamy now, lighter color. Almost looks like chocolate milk, I would say. And I would expect some fruit notes in this, but I would also expect some chocolatey notes. So we'll let it go to that 3.5 minutes, then we'll drain. But what you're gonna get with coffees is the lighter roasted it is, the more fruit notes you're gonna get in it. And the reason for that is that coffee is actually a fruit. These are the pits of fruits. When coffee was first discovered, it was actually being chewed on by the Arabs as they were picking it off trees. They didn't know they could roast it and brew it, of course. And so as they walked along the trail, they would spit out their seeds and the plants would spread and spread more and more, right? Well, eventually they figured out over time that they could use this to roast, but it's still a fruit to this day, and people will call it berry or they'll call them cherries more often. And you get some different colored ones on different trees. For example, I have a Brazilian right now with yellow fruit, which is known for having a higher sugar content than the red fruit. But most of the coffee you're gonna get is gonna be from red fruit. And each type of varietal in each different country is gonna have a little different look to it. And just like any other fruit or plant and vegetable you'd get. So when you go with lighter roasted coffee, you're gonna get more of those fruit notes. As you transition into the medium roast, you're gonna get more nut characteristics, sometimes even a cereal or grain note that's really appealing. And then it can go from there into deeper nut and chocolate notes. And as you get to dark roasted, you're gonna get more and more of a chocolatey note to an ashy, toasty, smoky note. But you'll also get, here we're at 3 minutes now, 3.5 minutes. So now we can drain. Give it another little stir while it's going into the cup. So you're gonna get real deep, dark chocolate notes, but that's another thing is that different types of coffee are gonna give you different fruit notes. Different types of coffee are gonna give you different nut notes. Different types of coffee will give you different chocolate notes. But those are the main kinds of flavors you're gonna get is fruit, nuts, and chocolate, and also sometimes some really great spice notes in there as well. When you get to the cleaner and cleaner cups, which is created by picking from the best plots on the farm, on the best days where they get the best exposure, sunlight, soil, they get the very best feeding because of the drainage, the way that the angle of the farm is in that spot. And then if they remove any beans that are defective in there, such as older beans or underripe beans or rotten beans, anything with a defect is removed, and that gives you more and more of a pure flavor profile. Okay, so this is finished draining. Now we have our second perfect cup. So we've got our light roasted Ethiopian with the 17:1 brewing ratio at 4 minutes and a coarse grind. We've got our medium roasted Guatemalan coffee at 3.5 minutes steeping time with a 15:1 brewing ratio and a medium grind. And now we're gonna go ahead with our dark roasted, finely ground Peruvian coffee. We're gonna go for a different profile on this one. Okay, this one we want a thicker, richer, more intense cup. So we're actually gonna do a 10:1 brewing ratio with some water that's a little less heated. So the first coffee we did with 205 degree water. The second one we did with 200 degree water. And the third one we're doing, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I get the amount of water just right. So we're at 200 grams. This one's done with 195 degree water. And boy, this is some really deep, rich looking coffee. It's got a very dark, semi-sweet almost looking chocolatiness to it. You can tell just by looking at it that it's fantastic. And you get that fresh creaminess from it actually being just roasted. These coffees were just roasted 2 days ago. So you'll notice a huge difference in your coffee when you drink it really fresh. That's one of the things that you really want to have is always ultra fresh coffee. Make sure we have our timer going here. So this one we're gonna do for only 1.5 minutes of steeping time because of the fact that we ground it very fine and we're doing a really rich amount of coffee to water ratio. We wanna balance that out by giving it a less steeping time, because the finer your grind is, the faster the flavor is gonna come out of the coffee. So even though you wanna create a rich, intense cup, you also don't want it to be so bitter and astringent that it's not enjoyable. Even someone that likes a really strong cup of coffee is still gonna want it to have somewhat of a refined profile. So at the 1.5 minute mark, we'll go ahead and drop it. At 1 minute, we're gonna give it a stir since we're not steeping it as long. Okay, so we're at 1 minute. Let's go ahead and give it a stir. So you can easily see how each person in the house could come along and make coffee to their own liking, their own way. You could use different types of coffee, but you could also use the same type of coffee and brew it different ways. This is actually my grandfather's mug. He had about 40 coffee mugs on his wall. He was such a collector of coffees. Everywhere he went, he kept one. Now we're at 1.5 minutes. But the funny thing about him, even though he drank coffee all day, every day, more coffee than anyone I've ever known, he didn't care what it was. He would take the freeze-dried instant coffees and even microwave that up with some water. I'm Ted the Third, if you didn't know, and he was Ted Sr., of course. My father's Ted Jr. So we live in a long legacy of coffee brewers. Now we're almost to the end of letting this one drain. And then we can go ahead and do a taste test, which is the fun part, right? Get to see what really made a difference. But the whole point of me doing this today is to show you how you could take a super inexpensive brewer and you can make yourself all sorts of great coffees. Now, when you are doing this, you're gonna wanna get a Burr grinder. You can check the website for those, the recommended ones. I've got some inexpensive models that you could do hand cranking with, and even entry level ones that are automatic. That's the one thing you're not gonna wanna spare an expense on, is getting fresh coffee, which you can roast yourself. But if you wanna get ultra great coffee and you don't know what to choose or how to roast it for yourself, that's what I'm here for. That's what I provide, as well as the tools and equipment you need. And I make them very simple, beginner style tools, as far as they're ones that pros will use, but they're not ultra expensive, ultra fancy tools, because when you're just getting started, you want to get something that works really well. Not by like an average consumer's standpoint, but from someone that really knows coffee and understands the differences and how these products work. Okay, so now I have this drained. So that way, anytime you want something, you can go on the website and see what I suggest. And then as you get more and more into it, you could start delving deeper and deeper, as deep as you like. So let's go ahead and do our taste test now. So we have this Light Roast Ethiopian. That's fruited. It's floral. It tastes almost like a peachy apricot-y note in there. We get some florals, like a jasmine-y note, almost a pine hint in the background. You're not going to notice all these flavors when you first start. You may never notice them, but over time your palate will get better and better, and you'll start noticing flavor differences in even other foods, which is really an exciting part of it. And for those people that say, hey, all I taste is coffee, or I could tell there's something different, it's familiar but I don't know what it is, that's awesome. That's one way along the trail. So the way it goes is you can't get there from there. You're not gonna drink some random coffee you got at a big box store and then all of a sudden you drink this coffee and you're gonna know every flavor in it. It's just not gonna happen. So give yourself some time, but as you find that you put the care into brewing it right and you take the steps seriously, you enjoy every flavor of it, you take your time learning all about how to do the coffees, over time you're gonna really notice these things. So let's try this Medium Roast Guatemalan. It's much more full-bodied. It's more along the chocolaty profile, I'd say. Almost like a melted semi-sweet chocolate. It's got a richness, bold factor to it, yet it's very clean in profile still. It doesn't have that murky, dull profile that you would get from something that's brewed with a little less care. Now let's try the Dark Roast Grandpa style coffee. That's very deep, very full. It has a very viscous texture to it. And you can tell that it would really do well if you added some milk. It would still have that strong coffee flavor. Wow, these are all so fantastic and so different. So this just shows you by your mood, by your preferences, by the types of coffee you're using from around the world, you can get completely different results. And we're doing it all with a $25 brewer. So there you go. Simple, easy to use, inexpensive, versatile, easy cleanup. Can't really say anything bad about it. It's a great way to get started. You could read more about it on the website under brewing tutorials and tips at the top menu. You're going to see a page on the Clever Brewer. It's going to show you a brewing tutorial that's handwritten. Also links on Amazon to get the brewer and the filters I recommend for it. I use the Chemex filters because I also use a Chemex brewer, but you could use them in your Clever Brewer and you may notice a little bit of a cleaner profile in your cup. You can find that on the Chemex page. So in future videos, I'll do ones on the Chemex, the AeroPress, other brewers. So stay tuned with me, see how it all goes. We'll learn it all together, all right? So have a great day. Signing off, this is Ted. See you next time.